On March 2, 2026, the world woke up to news that sent shockwaves through every major defense ministry on the planet. 3 B-1B Lancer bombers flew from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota and conducted strikes against Iranian ballistic missile sites and command and control infrastructure as part of Operation Epic Fury. This was the first ever direct continental United States to Iran combat strike by the Lancer, officially confirmed by United States Central Command. This was not the stealthy, ghost-like precision of the B-2 Spirit that had struck Iran's nuclear facilities 9 months earlier. This was something different. This was brute force. This was overwhelming conventional firepower delivered at supersonic speed from halfway around the world by an aircraft that was supposed to be winding down its career and heading for retirement. Instead, the bone was back, and Iran was paying the price. Recent Iran sorties lasted up to 37 hours round trip, with aerial refueling, showcasing the bomber's extraordinary global strike capability. Think about what that means in real terms. 37 hours in the air, pilots rotating in shifts, 4 crew members sealed inside a titanium and aluminum fuselage, crossing the Atlantic, transiting the Mediterranean, threading through hostile airspace, releasing weapons over Iranian targets, and then flying all the way back to South Dakota. No forward operating base, no staging area in the region, no carrier group required, just raw, intercontinental reach that no other conventional bomber on the face of the Earth can match, delivered by an aircraft that first flew over 4 decades ago and was canceled before most of its pilots were born. The deployment of the B-1B Lancer in Operation Epic Fury signified a critical milestone in the 2026 air campaign, marking the transition from stealth-only penetration to high-volume bomb truck dominance. While the B-2 Spirit and F-35 were required to dismantle Iran's sophisticated air defense networks on the opening night of the campaign, the appearance of the bone over Iranian targets confirmed that the United States and its allies had successfully established air superiority. Once the skies were clear, the bone was unleashed to do what it does better than any aircraft alive, which is carry an enormous volume of precision-guided munitions across intercontinental distances and put them exactly on target, one after another, with devastating efficiency. By March 7, 2026, several B-1B Lancer strategic bombers arrived at Royal Air Force Fairford in Gloucestershire, United Kingdom, marking a significant reinforcement of American air power in Europe and placing long-range conventional strike aircraft within reach of the Middle East, signaling preparation for a broader and more sustained air campaign if required. The message to Tehran and to every adversary watching was clear. America did not need a base next door to reach you. America did not need weeks of build-up to strike you. America could reach out from its own soil, from the Great Plains of South Dakota, and put steel on target anywhere on the planet within hours. And the aircraft delivering that message was one that the United States Air Force had almost thrown away before it ever fired a shot in anger. But to truly understand why the bone is back, and why it matters so profoundly in 2026, you have to go back to the beginning, back to the Cold War. Back to a time when the United States needed a bomber that the Soviet Union could not stop. Because the B-1B Lancer did not arrive fully formed. It was born, killed, resurrected, rebuilt, stripped of its original mission, and then reinvented as something its designers never imagined. It is one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of military aviation, and it starts not with a bomber, but with a question that haunted American defense planners for a decade. How do you build something that can fly faster than anything the enemy has, carry enough weapons to end a war, fly low enough to disappear from radar, and do it all from a base 10,000 miles away? The answer took 20 years, 2 presidential administrations, a cancellation, a resurrection, and 100 aircraft to find. The answer was the bone. In 1955, the United States Air Force issued requirements for a new strategic bomber to replace the aging B-52 Stratofortress. The Air Force sought a bomber that could fly at supersonic speeds at high altitude and at high subsonic speeds at low altitude. It was an extraordinarily ambitious goal, calling for an aircraft that could transition seamlessly between 2 completely different performance regimes. doing each one better than any dedicated platform that had come before. No aircraft had ever been designed from the ground up to do both simultaneously. But the Cold War was not a time for modest ambitions. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons and was building more of them. The Soviet air defense network was becoming the most sophisticated in the world. America needed a penetrator, something that could get through regardless of what the enemy put in the sky to stop it. In December 1957, the United States Air Force selected North American Aviation's B-1B Valkyrie for this role, a six-engine bomber that could cruise at Mach 3 at high altitude. The Valkyrie was breathtaking in concept. 3 times the speed of sound, an altitude that placed it above the reach of virtually every Soviet interceptor and surface-to-air missile of the era. It was the apex of high-altitude strategic bombing doctrine, and then, almost immediately, that doctrine collapsed. The development of the Soviet SA-2 surface-to-air missile system, the same weapon that shot down Francis Gary Powers in his U-2 spy plane over the Soviet Union in May 1960, demonstrated conclusively that high-altitude flight was no longer the sanctuary it had been. Speed and altitude alone could not guarantee penetration of Soviet airspace. The Valkyrie concept was fundamentally compromised before the aircraft ever entered service. The Air Force needed a new approach. And so the search began again. The origin of the B-1 can be traced to 1961, when the Air Force began considering alternatives to the B-1B Valkyrie, which had just been downgraded from full production to a limited test aircraft program. At that time, long-range strategic missiles were assumed to be the weapons of the future, with manned long-range bombers being considered for a secondary role. But the Air Force never fully accepted that logic. Missiles could not be recalled once launched. Missiles could not be redirected to a new target after receiving updated intelligence. A missile could not loiter over a battlefield, waiting for a target of opportunity. A bomber could do all of those things. And so the search for the next generation of American strategic air power continued. A machine that would take everything the United States had learned about long-range bombing and push it to the absolute limit of what aerospace engineering could achieve. The program that emerged from this need was called the Advanced Manned Strategic Aircraft, known by its acronym AMSA. It was a classified effort to design a bomber that could fly at low altitude, beneath the radar coverage of Soviet early warning systems, at high subsonic speed, close enough to the ground that terrain masking would render it essentially invisible to the defenses designed to stop it. It was a revolutionary concept. Instead of flying over the threat, this new bomber would fly through it, hugging the terrain at 500 feet and 900 miles per hour, threading between radar beams and surface-to-air missile envelopes in a way that no high-altitude bomber ever could. The Advanced Manned Strategic Aircraft was officially assigned the designation B-1A in April 1969. New requests for proposals were issued in November 1969, with Boeing, General Dynamics, and North American Rockwell all submitting designs. 3 of America's greatest aerospace companies were competing for one of the most important defense contracts in the nation's history. The stakes could not have been higher. The winner would build the backbone of American strategic air power for a generation. The Air Force awarded the contract for the B-1 bomber to Rockwell International on June 5, 1970, while General Electric was awarded a contract on the same day for the F101 afterburning low-bypass fan jet engine that would power the aircraft. North American Rockwell, soon to be renamed Rockwell International, was now responsible for building the most advanced bomber the world had ever seen. The clock was ticking. And what they designed was unlike anything that had ever left a drawing board. The B-1A featured variable geometry wings, a revolutionary design concept that allowed the wings to sweep forward or back in flight, dramatically changing the aircraft's aerodynamic characteristics depending on the mission phase. Fully extended, the wings provided the high lift needed for short-field takeoff and fuel-efficient cruise. Fully swept back tight against the fuselage, the aircraft transformed into a sleek, low-drag, supersonic dart capable of penetrating defended airspace at treetop level before any radar could track it. It was a shape that had never been attempted at this scale. or with this level of performance requirement. And Rockwell was going to have to make it work. North American Rockwell became Rockwell International in 1973, with the first B-1A rolling out at Palmdale, California on October 26, 1974. After years of classified development and engineering work, America finally laid eyes on its next strategic bomber. What they saw was breathtaking. A long, sleek fuselage with a sharply pointed nose. 4 engines buried in paired nacelles beneath the variable geometry wings, generating a howl that could be heard miles away on the flight line. A cockpit designed for a crew of 4, with ejection capsules that would blast the entire forward section of the aircraft free, rather than ejecting crew members individually. It was the most sophisticated military aircraft ever built, and its test program would prove it could do everything its designers promised. Rockwell built 4 B-1A prototypes, which began a test program demonstrating their ability to fly at Mach 2.2/1 400 miles per hour at high altitude, while carrying either conventional or nuclear weapons. At low altitude, the aircraft could sustain Mach 0.85 while following terrain contours automatically using its advanced terrain-following radar. The B-1A was extraordinary. It was everything the Air Force had asked for, and in many respects, it exceeded expectations. The variable sweep wing worked exactly as designed. The terrain-following system was precise and reliable. The aircraft was fast, long-ranged, and carried an enormous weapons load. It should have been the beginning of a triumphant program that would put 100 of these machines into the hands of American strategic bomber wings. Instead, it was the beginning of a decade-long fight for survival. On June 30, 1977, President Jimmy Carter announced that the B-1A program would be canceled in favor of intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and a modernized fleet of B-52 bombers armed with cruise missiles. Carter framed the decision as a strategic one rather than a budgetary one, arguing that the AGM-86 air-launched cruise missile could accomplish much of what the B-1A was designed to do, but at a fraction of the cost. A B-52 launching cruise missiles from hundreds of miles outside Soviet airspace could theoretically achieve similar results without risking a manned crew over the most heavily defended territory on Earth. And, secretly, work had already begun on a far more advanced classified project, the effort that would eventually emerge as the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The B-1A was sacrificed in favor of cruise missiles and a future stealth aircraft that was still years away from existence. The Air Force was furious. Industry was outraged. 4 prototype aircraft were mothballed, and the program that had consumed a decade of engineering genius and billions of dollars was placed on indefinite hold. But the men and women who had built the B-1A were not ready to let their creation die, and events in the wider world were about to give them the opening they needed. During the 1980 presidential campaign, Ronald Reagan made the cancellation of the B-1 program a centerpiece of his argument that President Carter had left America militarily weakened. Reagan's critique resonated with the American public and with the defense establishment. The Soviet Union had not stood still during the Carter years. Soviet strategic forces had expanded, Soviet theater nuclear weapons had been deployed in Europe, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in December 1979 had shattered whatever optimism remained about détente. America needed to rearm, and one of the most powerful symbols of that rearmament would be the revival of the bomber that Carter had canceled. Reagan won the 1980 election in a landslide, and one of his very first major defense decisions was to bring the bone back from the dead. In January 1982, the United States Air Force awarded 2 contracts to Rockwell International worth a combined $2.2 billion for the development and production of 100 new B-1 bombers. Numerous significant changes were made to the original design to better suit the revised mission requirements, resulting in the B-1B. The B-1B was not simply a revived B-1A. It was a fundamentally different aircraft, redesigned from the ground up around the lessons learned during the B-1A test program and the strategic realities of the early 1980s. Some of the changes made it faster in certain respects, Others made it more survivable. All of them were driven by a hard-eyed assessment of what the Soviet threat had become in the years since the original program was canceled. The most significant external difference between the B-1A and the B-1B was a simplification of the engine intake design. The variable aspect intake ramps of the B-1A, which enabled Mach 2.2 performance at high altitude, were replaced with simpler fixed geometry intakes. This change reduced the B-1B's maximum speed at high altitude to approximately Mach 1.25, but it produced a dramatic reduction in the aircraft's radar cross-section, an advantageous trade-off given the revised mission profile. The logic was straightforward. The B-1B was not going to fly at high altitude, it was going to fly at low altitude, at high subsonic speed, beneath Soviet radar coverage. At low altitude, the ability to reach Mach 2.2 was essentially irrelevant. What mattered was survivability, and a smaller radar cross-section meant better survivability. The simplification of the intakes was a classic example of Cold War engineering pragmatism, sacrificing a capability you do not need in order to improve a capability you do. The B-1B was structurally redesigned to increase its gross takeoff weight from 395,000 to 477,000 pounds, allowing it to carry a full internal fuel load alongside a maximum weapons payload. The empty weight of the B-1B was only 3% greater than that of the B-1A, despite the significant increase in maximum takeoff weight, a testament to the efficiency of the revised structural design. The four General Electric F101 GE102 turbofan engines with afterburner each produce over 30,000 pounds of thrust, giving the B-1B a total installed thrust of more than 120,000 pounds. The aircraft spans 137 feet in wingspan when the wings are fully extended in the forward position and collapses to just 79 feet when swept fully aft. It stretches 146 feet in length and stands 34 feet tall. Its fuel capacity exceeds 265,000 pounds, giving it the intercontinental range needed to strike targets anywhere on Earth from bases in the continental United States. Inside the cockpit, the B-1B represented the state-of-the-art in 1980s avionics technology, and those systems have been continuously upgraded in the decades since. The primary offensive sensor is the Westinghouse AN/APQ-164 forward-looking passive electronically scanned array radar, with modes including synthetic aperture radar for high-resolution ground mapping, ground-moving target indication to track and engage moving vehicles, and automatic terrain following that allows the aircraft to hug the Earth at low altitude without pilot input, threading through valleys and over ridgelines at high speed in complete darkness or instrument meteorological conditions. The AN/ALQ-161 electronic warfare system detects and identifies the full spectrum of adversary threat emitters and applies the appropriate jamming technique either automatically or through operator input. The system is linked to 8 AN/ALE-49 flare dispensers containing massive infrared countermeasure flares weighing over 3 pounds each, among the largest such flares used by any aircraft in the world. The B-1B also carries the ALE-50 towed decoy system, which deploys a small device on a cable behind the aircraft to lure incoming missiles away from the bomber itself. Although the B-1B is not technically a stealth aircraft, its structure, serpentine intake paths, and extensive use of radar-absorbent material give it a radar cross-section approximately 1/50th that of the similarly sized B-52 Stratofortress, roughly equivalent to that of a small fighter aircraft. For an aircraft carrying 75,000 pounds of weapons, that is a remarkable achievement. It will not hide from modern integrated air defense systems the way a B-2 Spirit will. But it is not supposed to. The B-1B was designed to survive in a degraded threat environment, flying low and fast through gaps in air defense coverage, relying on electronic warfare and terrain masking rather than low observable geometry to reach its targets. The B-1B carries its weapons payload across 3 internal weapons bays and 6 external hardpoints under the fuselage. The maximum internal weapons load is 75,000 pounds, the largest conventional payload in the United States Air Force inventory. A single aircraft can carry 84 Mach 82,500-pound general-purpose bombs, 24 GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack munitions, 24 AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff missiles, 8 Mark 65 sea mines, or 30 cluster munitions, among many other weapon combinations. The first production B-1B performed its initial flight on October 18, 1984, with initial delivery to operational service on June 29, 1985. Over the following 3 years, Rockwell delivered all 100 aircraft to the United States Air Force, standing up 5 bomb wings at bases across the country. The Bone had returned, but the mission it had been built to fly, a nuclear penetration strike deep into Soviet territory, was one it would never actually execute. For the first several years of its operational life, the B-1B was a nuclear alert aircraft. Crews sat in alert facilities adjacent to their bombers, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, waiting for a message that never came. The B-1B held nuclear alert continuously throughout the late 1980s, its crews drilling endlessly for a mission that grew less likely with every passing year as the Cold War thawed and Soviet power began its terminal decline. When the Berlin Wall fell in November 1989, and the Soviet Union itself dissolved 2 years later, the strategic rationale for the B-1B's nuclear mission evaporated almost overnight. The B-1B was reassigned to Air Combat Command in 1992 and outfitted for conventional bombing operations, with its nuclear mission formally eliminated in 1994 in accordance with the START I Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. The aircraft that had been built at enormous cost to end the world was now being repurposed to fight the smaller, messier wars that defined the post-Cold War era. It was a profound transformation, from the ultimate weapon of superpower confrontation to a precision strike platform for regional conflicts. And the aircraft that made that transition most successfully, that reinvented itself most completely, was the Bone. The B-1B made its combat debut during Operation Desert Fox in December 1998, striking targets in Iraq in a series of punishing air raids designed to degrade Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction program and punish Iraqi non-compliance with United Nations weapons inspectors. It was the aircraft's first combat mission after 13 years of operational service, and it validated what the Air Force had long argued, that the Bone was capable of delivering conventional precision munitions with accuracy and volume that no other platform could match. The crews who flew Desert Fox returned with the confidence in their aircraft and their weapons that would serve them well in the years ahead. The real test came in 1999. 6 B-1Bs were used in Operation Allied Force over Kosovo and Serbia, delivering more than 20% of the total ordnance dropped by all coalition aircraft, while flying less than 2% of the total combat sorties. Read that statistic again, because it is one of the most remarkable figures in the history of modern air warfare. 6 aircraft, flying 2% of all sorties, delivered 20% of all ordnance. That is a weapons efficiency ratio that no other aircraft in the coalition could come close to matching. It was a stunning demonstration of what the Bone's payload capacity meant in practical terms, not as an abstract specification number, but as a real-world operational advantage that translated directly into targets destroyed per sortie flown. Then came September 11, 2001, and everything changed again. During the first 6 months of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, 8 B-1B Lancers dropped nearly 40% of the total bomb tonnage delivered by all coalition air forces. 8 aircraft against the entire combined weight of the coalition air campaign. The mathematics are almost incomprehensible. A handful of bones flying from Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, conducting sorties that lasted upward of 12 to 15 hours, delivering enormous loads of joint direct attack munitions against Taliban and Al-Qaeda positions across the full length and breadth of Afghanistan. During those 6 months, the B-1Bs delivered nearly 3,900 joint direct attack munitions, fully 67% of the total usage by all coalition aircraft combined. The Bone was not just useful in Afghanistan, it was irreplaceable. When American and coalition special operations forces needed immediate close air support in a remote mountain valley at 3 in the morning, the B-1B was overhead, its targeting pod locked onto the enemy position, its weapons systems officers cycling through dozens of GPS coordinates, dropping weapon after weapon with precision that saved American lives on a daily basis. In Afghanistan, B-1Bs fulfilled an average of 2 to 3 air support requests per day, intervening in ground engagements with a speed and precision that ground commanders described as transformative. The Afghanistan campaign revealed something about the B-1B that its Cold War designers had never anticipated. The aircraft was extraordinarily well suited for the kind of long-endurance, close air support mission that defined the wars of the post-September 11th era. Its massive fuel capacity gave it a loiter time over target that no tactical fighter could match. Its large internal weapons bays gave it the ability to service multiple targets on a single sortie without returning to base for rearming. Its terrain-following radar and sophisticated targeting systems allowed it to operate in the pitch-black Afghan nights, finding and engaging targets that would have been invisible to older generation bombers. The bone had been built for a nuclear war and had instead become the most valuable close air support platform in a counterinsurgency. In Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, the B-1B flew less than 1% of all combat sorties while delivering 43% of every joint direct attack munition expended over Iraq. That figure represents the single most efficient use of air power in the history of the Iraqi campaign. B-1Bs penetrated Iraqi airspace on the opening night of the war, striking Republican Guard barracks, command and control facilities, and leadership targets in Baghdad as part of the shock and awe campaign. As the ground war progressed and American forces moved north through Iraq, the bone transitioned seamlessly into the close air support and armed overwatch role that had served so well in Afghanistan, loitering above advancing ground forces, ready to respond to calls for fire within seconds. During the 2011 intervention in Libya during Operation Odyssey Dawn, B-1Bs flew combat missions directly from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, the first time in history that B-1Bs had flown a combat mission from the continental United States. They struck Libyan air defense systems, command and control infrastructure, and hardened sites, helping to dismantle Muammar Gaddafi's air defense network and pave the way for the broader NATO air campaign. Those Libya missions were a preview of what the bone would demonstrate again 15 years later over Iran, the ability to reach out from the American heartland and strike targets anywhere on Earth without requiring so much as a single gallon of fuel from a forward base. Beginning in 2014, the B-1B was deployed against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria as part of Operation Inherent Resolve. From August 2014 to January 2015 alone, the bone accounted for 8% of all United States Air Force sorties during the operation. Against the Islamic State, the B-1B operated in a role that combined the strategic strike missions it had been designed for with the close air support missions it had mastered in Afghanistan and Iraq, striking command facilities, vehicle convoys, weapons depots, and oil infrastructure, while simultaneously providing direct support to Kurdish and Iraqi ground forces engaged in close combat with Islamic State fighters in urban environments. On April 14, 2018, B-1Bs launched 19 AGM-158A joint air-to-surface standoff missiles as part of the United States, United Kingdom, and French strikes on chemical weapons facilities in Damascus and Homs, Syria. That mission marked a pivotal moment in the B-1B's evolution, the first operational combat firing of the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, confirming the bone's transformation from a penetrating low-level bomber into a long-range standoff strike platform capable of engaging heavily defended targets without ever entering the threat envelope of modern integrated air defense systems. On February 2, 2024, the United States deployed B-1Bs to strike 85 terrorist targets in 7 locations across Iraq and Syria as part of a multi-tiered retaliatory response to the killing of 3 United States Army Reserve soldiers in a drone attack on the remote outpost known as Tower 22 in Jordan. The strikes were launched directly from the continental United States, covering thousands of miles in a single continuous mission, demonstrating once again that the B-1B's intercontinental reach was not a theoretical capability, but an operational reality that could be executed on short notice whenever the National Command Authority gave the order. Throughout its combat career, the B-1B has been subjected to a continuous and intensive upgrade program designed to keep the aging airframe competitive with the evolving threat environment. The Block D upgrade added Joint Direct Attack munition capability and the ALE-50 towed decoy system. Block E upgraded the avionics computers and added the wind-corrected munitions dispenser, the AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapon, and the AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, dramatically extending the aircraft's standoff strike capability. In 2012, the Air Force commenced the Integrated Battle Station Modification Program, a combination of 3 simultaneous upgrades that together represented the most comprehensive modernization of the B-1B since the aircraft entered service. The fully integrated data link enabled electronic data sharing and eliminated the need to manually enter targeting information between systems. The vertical situational display unit replaced existing flight instruments with multifunction color displays. The central integrated test system installed a new diagnostic architecture capable of monitoring over 9,000 separate parameters on the aircraft in real time. The B-1B also became the first aircraft to fly at supersonic speed using synthetic fuel in March 2008, when a Lancer from Dyess Air Force Base flew over Texas and New Mexico on a 50-50 blend of conventional JPA petroleum and a synthetic fuel derived from natural gas using the Fischer-Tropsch process. That test was part of a broader Air Force program to reduce the strategic vulnerability that comes from dependence on conventional petroleum-based aviation fuel, a quietly important milestone in the long history of the B-1B's operational service. The most recent and arguably most significant upgrade to the B-1B is the Load-Adaptable Modular Pylon System, which restores and upgrades the aircraft's previously dormant external hardpoints to carry larger, more modern standoff missiles and hypersonic weapons. The new pylon system increases the B-1B's total missile capacity to 36 and enables it to carry hypersonic weapons, including the AGM-183A Air-Launched Rapid Response Weapon, a boost glide system that achieves speeds greater than Mach 5. An aircraft that entered service carrying gravity bombs and was considered obsolete by the early 2010s is now being equipped with hypersonic missiles that can strike targets at 5 times the speed of sound. The B-1B is not aging gracefully. It is aging lethally. The B-1B holds 61 world records for speed, payload, distance, and time to climb across different aircraft weight classes. It is the only aircraft in the United States Air Force inventory that can carry the AGM-158C long-range anti-ship missile, making it a critical asset for maritime strike operations in the Pacific Theater, where the ability to threaten enemy naval surface groups from beyond the range of their escort air defense systems could prove decisive in any future conflict with a peer competitor. It has flown on synthetic fuel. It has fired hypersonic weapons in testing. It has struck targets on 5 continents. And it continues to fly combat missions in 2026 with no signs of stopping. By early 2021, the original fleet of 100 B-1Bs had been reduced to 62 aircraft through a combination of retirements and accident losses. By September 2021, Air Force Global Strike Command retired an additional 17 of the least serviceable airframes, leaving a fleet of 45 aircraft split between Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota and Dyess Air Force Base in Texas. The retirements were a deliberate strategy, concentrating resources on the most capable airframes, maximizing the mission-capable rate of the remaining fleet, and sustaining the B-1B's operational effectiveness for as long as needed until its replacement is ready. What makes the B-1B Lancer uniquely remarkable in America's 2026 defense posture is its unmatched combination of range, speed, and payload. No other aircraft in the entire United States Air Force inventory can carry as large a conventional weapons load. With a maximum takeoff weight of 477,000 pounds and a fuel load exceeding 265,000 pounds, the Lancer possesses intercontinental reach without aerial refueling and extended loiter time over target areas when tanker support is available. The variable geometry swing wing design, spanning from 137 feet extended to just 79 feet swept aft, directly enables the bone to transition from a high-drag, stable takeoff configuration to a low-drag, high-speed combat penetration profile, achieving Mach 1.2 at sea level, faster than many dedicated fighter aircraft at altitude. The B-1B is currently targeted for full replacement by the Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider, with retirement planned for approximately 2032. Ellsworth Air Force Base B-1Bs have already relocated to Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota to allow facility construction in support of the transition to the B-21. The Raider is a sixth-generation stealth bomber that incorporates everything the United States has learned about low-observable aircraft design since the B-2 Spirit first flew in 1989. It is smaller, stealthier, and designed from the outset to operate against the most sophisticated integrated air defense systems that China and Russia can field. When the B-21 is fully operational, it will be able to go places and strike targets that even the B-2 cannot reach. And the bone, which survived cancellation, survived the Cold War, survived the strategic confusion of the 1990s, and survived 2 decades of the most intense conventional combat use any bomber has ever experienced, will finally be allowed to rest. But not yet, because in March 2026, the bone is still flying, still reaching, still striking. In the most headline-making mission of its career, B-1B Lancers flew non-stop from Ellsworth Air Force Base to strike Iranian ballistic missile sites and command and control centers, the first ever direct continental United States to Iran combat strike by the Lancer, officially confirmed by United States Central Command. 60 years after its conception, 40 years after its first operational deployment, having survived cancellation, Cold War, post-Cold War budget cuts, the stripping of its nuclear mission, the grinding attrition of 2 decades of close air support in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a fleet reduction that cut it from 100 aircraft to 45, the B-1B Lancer is still here, still flying from the Great Plains, still reaching across oceans and continents, still putting weapons on target with a precision and volume that no other aircraft alive can match. They called it the Bone because of its designation, B-1, but the name fits in another way too, because like a bone, the B-1B Lancer has proven to be something that bends under enormous stress, that absorbs punishment, that would destroy a lesser structure, and that somehow endures. It is the backbone of America's conventional long-range strike capability, and it will remain so until the last one is finally wheeled into the boneyard and the lights go out for the last time at Ellsworth and Dyess. This has been Classified Hardware. Subscribe for weekly deep-dive documentaries covering every major United States military airframe ever developed and deployed, from the legends of the Cold War to the most advanced platforms flying today.